guys, welcome to yet another episode of the East Podcast. My name is Partha Srinivasan, and while I am not an expert on any of the topics that I explore, I'm certainly hungry to know more about the technology that affects me on a day-to-day life, and it also makes me very curious. I seek out the counsel of people who are experts in topics that we cover on the East Podcast, and I like to build conversation with them, and that is essentially what this podcast is all about. Now, the East Podcast aims to bring you technology that's closer to your senses. It's something that we interact on a day-to-day basis. So if we are talking about enterprise technologies that affect us, we're talking about servers, data centers, or even concepts like artificial intelligence, robotics, blockchain, and we've covered some of these concepts on our previous episodes. But sometimes we also talk about consumer type technologies like driverless cars, or maybe even a consumer product if somebody decides to approach us. But we'll cross that bridge when we get there. Today, we're not talking consumer technologies. We're not talking about any consumer product. We're not talking about anything enterprise. But we're more talking about how as a professional, technology affects our lives. I have with me Farrukh Ahmed. Farrukh, thank you very much for joining us on this podcast today.
Thank you for having me.
Farrukh, if you could just take our listeners through a little bit of your journey of, who you are, what you do, and, just set the stage about the kind of person you are at this point.
I like to define myself as a curious person. So that's my overall definition. I just get to want to learn things. But professionally, I am a banker with almost 20 years of experience in banking. Out of the 20 years, I've shuffled between different segments, different, areas within the bank, from support segments into a little bit of front-end sales, customer experience, transformation. But what's really, really close to my heart and what I've been doing for the past almost 13 years nonstop is corporate training. So I use my skill set that I've learned, and whether in banking or otherwise, and then I try to pass that on to people and to help them develop and grow.
So when you say corporate training, what are the kind of things that you do as part of, what's your day-to-day for a corporate trainer?
So day to day, being in the role and working for a bank, it is limited mostly to the kind of services and products that we offer. And I'm supposed to be responsible for my entire front end, which includes sales, contact center, branches, and people who would directly interact with customers to coach them, train them about the products and services that we offer, as and when we develop new programs, new services, new products, as well as enhance their skills for a higher level of customer experience.
I mean, I'm also given to understand that you're a motivational speaker, a time management coach, and you also have a podcast of your own. So tell us a little bit about that.
Yeah. So of course, when I'm managing at this point in time, roughly around 350 odd people, in terms of their performance, in terms of their delivery, I have to make sure that all my teams are well equipped with the knowledge, plus they're also highly motivated. We keep on going through different circumstances, different market conditions. We are all going through a situation right at this point in time with respect to the COVID-19 virus all around the world. And it is difficult to stay motivated in this situation. So motivation is a key element of all my trainings. I focus my personal love, I might say, passion is time management. That's something that I have learned along the way. Came to me, I like to say it came to me naturally, but I was keen enough to understand the principles behind time management and how it can help everybody. And like you, I'm also very curious in getting to know people, making friends and colleagues with people who are actually making a difference in the society. So my podcast is basically focused on inspiration and motivation. And my guests are usually people who have created a difference in the society, irrespective of the field that they might be in. So I've been fortunate enough to interview entrepreneurs, celebrities, people in different fields, not just bankers, but engineers, musicians, actors, any way that they're influencing people around them.
So Farouk's podcast is available on all of the latest, all of the available platforms in the Middle East, in on all over the world actually. So it's on iTunes, it's on
Yeah.
Spotify, YouTube, it's on Stitcher, Google Podcasts, and even Angami in the Middle East, which is actually picking up as a great podcast host. But let's come back to a little bit about your journey. I mean, you said you've been doing trainings now for about 13 years.
Yes.
Um, if you could kind of take us a little bit about the training industry, so to speak, and how has it evolved over time. I mean, obviously, it started off very analog and very visceral, very for want of a analog, and now we have technology that has kind of pervaded into every point of our lives. So, how has that affected you, and how has it transformed you, and what do you see? Where do you see it as of today over the last maybe 15 plus years that you've been doing, 13 plus years that you've been doing this?
Yeah, so it's a great question. And you see, the key thing in training industry, and I like to extend it a little bit, and rather than just training, into coaching and mentoring, and I'll come to that in a little bit. But mainly, the biggest thing that a trainer needs to uh, work or focus on is how to be emotionally connected to the people that they are training. And if there's no emotional connection, there is no actually no impact. Nobody would want to listen to a trainer or a coach or a mentor if they don't uh, connect with them in terms of their own personal experience. So I feel like there are two types of trainers per se. One is a technical trainer, which you see, more like educational stuff, and things like if you go into professional industry, technical skills could be something as simple as your education that you took in your school or college, and then going to professional education, or it could be something related to your career. When you join a new organization, you're trained for your technical skills, but that's more of a bookish training, which somehow is limited to the kind of job role requirement. But if somebody is supposed to have an impact on the lives of people, then they have to look beyond that. So when I do have a lot of technical trainings as part of my day-to-day job, but then I extend it with personalizing it with my own experience, with my own lessons in motivation, with my own lessons in time management, with my own lessons in sales strategy, for example. So the way to make my for example my sales staff into a complete and effective salesperson is to have them equipped with the technical knowledge of the product and the process, the market competition, but at the same time be empathetic and emotionally connected with the customers that they're going to meet. And that's where like I said, coaching and mentoring comes in. So coaching and mentoring is more like the human side or the EQ side of the training. And I think now with time, training is evolving more rapidly into these elements. Uh, if you go back around 20, 25 years ago, training was more about technical training rather than these motivational speaking and mentoring and coaching and hand holding. There were always these motivational speakers around, but then it was something that was considered to be a specialized area. But now managers are becoming these mentors. Managers are beginning to understand that you can't have a stick and carrot approach all the time. You need to have an empathetic approach. You need to have emotional connection with your staff. You can't have a 9 to 5 relationship with your staff anymore. So that's how now we are going into the transitional phase of into a more humanistic approach in training. As far as technology is concerned, at the end of the day, the goal is to be able to connect with people, and technology is helping us tremendously. We are no longer bound by, geographic locations. We're not bound by not being able to speak to people far away from us. And now I have, in this situation, I have adapted into delivering my content to focus groups online through various video conferencing and webinar softwares. So I plan to do, I'm doing a weekly webinar session, which is open to all, but whoever registers is invited. And right now I'm focusing on the issues that we're facing in the light of the COVID-19 crisis globally. And 15 years ago, even 10 years ago, I don't think it was have been possible or effective to have that done. And one thing I like to
If I may,
say, sure,
if I may interject at this point, it's not that it wasn't possible. It's just that now the tools are far more accessible, far more affordable, and you're obviously building into an ecosystem that is generally more universal, so to speak. Like you have tools that are available like Zoom or Google Meet, which didn't exist. I mean, they were only available to a select few. And you had corporate type
exactly,
environments where you had unified communication solutions like the Polycoms of the world. But
yes.
it never, it has evolved to a point where it's now accessible to everybody. And so coming back to your point, yes, it's definitely opened up the world to a range of opportunities.
Yeah. So I always say, if I was given a choice of living, if there was no way of avoiding this COVID-19 crisis that's extremely unique and overwhelming for the entire world, and if there was no way around it, I would rather have it now than 20 years ago. And that's exactly because of these advantages that we have today. Look at you and I. I mean, we're sitting so far apart, but it's just like as if we're having a conversation face to face.
Absolutely. I mean, the technology has enabled in a big way, and that's just fantastic to see the way it has helped, especially in this kind of a situation. But these kind of tools didn't really exist. I mean, you're talking about only the enabling piece right now, but what about the planning phase and the tools that you use to actually present? Even these have evolved. I mean, gone are the days when you had to use one of those slideshow projectors. Obviously, that's like 20 plus years old.
I remember using those. Yes, I remember using those projectors back in the day.
Right.
You used to have these
Yeah.
slides and
Right, and
transparencies.
obviously that doesn't exist anymore. We moved on to the digital projectors, and you now have.
In fact, believe it or not, I've even used those actual slide projectors like the way we used to have
Uh-huh.
back in the day. I think it's quite an old technology, obsolete
Or the
technology.
70s, the
I
actual
wonder
slide
if
pieces. You're talking about with the 70s slide piece
yeah,
projectors.
yes,
Oh,
yes,
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 yes, yes. I have seen
yes.
those as well. They're fun to work. They're fun to work.
They were
I-
fun to work. I have used them for the sake of using them. I mean, I'm not that old,
right.
but I have used them for the sake of experience,
Right.
and they were something else. I mean, at that point in time, they seemed like magical technology.
Right, and it's evolved. Like now, presentations are literally a thing on the computer they use, and you have concepts like ultra shot through projectors with human
Yeah,
interfacing. Technology has evolved, and these things obviously make a big difference because now you're able to tell a story, and you're able to train, and you're able to empathize with people. Using technology actually to such a large extent and make it so much more inclusive, which a lot of times trainings of the past was so methodical, so robotic that you'd be like, oh my god, we're going for another training. But now it's not the case. Now it's like, oh wow, what are we going to learn today?
yeah,
Right? I mean, that's
yeah,
generally the outcome.
yeah.
So
True.
cool. So now coming back to where the technology is today, and we've obviously explored that a lot. But are you also seeing uh, an uptake in how the consumers are picking up on these pieces, and how are you seeing, like from the trainee perspective, how easy is it for them to kind of adapt to these technologies?
Well, it is extremely easy now. Everything is available on your mobile phone. Forget even getting onto a laptop and binding yourself to a table and chair. Everything is now readily available on your phone, whether it is a video conference or a micro content that you just consume riding a taxi, or on your way to work in a metro. There are many different ways of divulging information now, but there's a negative side to it, in fact, that I would like to address here. And that's something that I talk about a lot in the conferences and seminars that I attend. And that is that people slowly are getting addicted to training. And addiction for anything is negative, and it's not good for you. It should be avoided. And when I say addicted to training, is because of the ease of availability and accessibility for different programs, now people like to consume content but not act on the content. And that's where the problem lies. So when I am training, my request to my trainees, the attendees, is my objective is to be the last training session that they attend before taking action and before starting to make changes in their lives. Because otherwise, it's just like any other content that they would consume anywhere else in the world. And you will see that a lot of people get addicted to a point that they want to attend every training session, whether it is a life coaching session or it is something related to their profession. They think that they will learn new things in every training session, but until and unless they start implementing it, all of those practically go to waste. And another negative aspect to that is that the retention is going down. So earlier we used to say that we are successful, the training session was successful if somebody is able to retain 30-40% of the content. But now that retention has gone down significantly to a point where we say even if a person is able to retain, let's say, 10-15% of the content, it's a win situation for a trainer. So those are some elements that now trainers around the world are working on. One of the things is that to have a lesser amount of content, have micro content, multiple levels of content delivery, so that people are able to digest it. But at the end of the day, I think my something that I always tell my training attendees is that just if it's a choice and you want to attend a session for your own self, choose wisely. Look for a mentor rather than a trainer. Look for a coach rather than a trainer. Get attached to that person. Communicate with that person. Get connected with that trainer, that mentor, coach. After the session, act on the lessons, and then give feedback and ask for more, rather than going to 20 different kinds of trainers.
That's a very interesting point you raise, and I kind of understand where you're coming from with that as well, because there's a lot of focus, and this is more relevant today than before, is upskilling to add beyond what your your school or your college or your degree offers. Like, for example, if I were to look at myself, I am at a stage of my life, not because of what I studied in college. I'm actually a graduate of economics, but I've worked in technology. I've been in technology for nearly 2 decades now. I've been fond of marketing and communication, which is literally nothing related to my graduate degree. And this is all based on what I've learned along the way. But I think there is obviously a line that you need to draw, is that if you're learning something through upskilling, you also need to be able to allow yourself enough time to apply what you learn and actually build on those skill sets, rather than just learning for the sake of learning or for the sake of the certification, when you don't actually have, when you aren't able to apply anything of that at all. So that is, I guess, where you could draw the line and build up on that, right?
Right. Absolutely.
Excellent. Okay. So now let's look at how you mentioned a very important, another very interesting point is micro training, or bite-sized pieces of information. So is that where technology, and is that where the services of the tomorrow are coming in? Like, if you look at things like the small coach. I don't know if you've really heard of this, but there are these. There's a process that's floating around on Twitter called SMOL Coach, and what they do is they provide you micro trainings for about 15 minutes each. And one of the courses on that was obviously this infernal Dalgona coffee, but it did so well, it picked up so much. And these are like small pieces of training, so 15 minutes to 20 minutes at best, and completely free. So is that where information sharing, and is that where training is headed? And is it going to be good? Is it sustainable? Where is it going?
I think so, yes. It's a good question about especially where it's going to land in the near future, how the landscape's going to look like for training. But to answer your the earlier part of your question is, yes, bite-sized training is becoming the thing of today, and it's going to be there in the foreseeable future as well. And that's exactly because of the shortening of the attention span of people. So much of content is out there, and people would just like to scroll. So now you can see people giving bite-sized information on all platforms, whether it is Twitter or TikTok or even YouTube. 10-15 minutes, you learn something and then you move on. There is slight challenge to that when it comes to technical training. So, for example, if you want to learn some concept related to, let's say, a programmer wants to upskill himself in terms of coding, then that would have to be starting and ending and complete coverage of a particular topic, and that could be a longer scenario. But yes, at the same time, I think people are also realizing that they cannot be restricted to a single faculty. And I have a program on being a jack of all is better than a master of none, or jack of some is being jack of some is better than being a master of one. And my argument in that is that now, in this given day and age, no matter what role you play in your organization or in your personal life, you're always either way juggling multiple roles. So there's no harm in learning multiple skills. Now, when you're stepping out of your comfort zone, it gets overwhelming if you get engaged in a longer form of training. So that's where the bite size content comes into play, right? Either that or just small bite size marginal information related to your, let's say, in my scenario, I do that with my people in terms of the campaigns that we run in the bank for our customers. So quickly give them a bite size information like 10-15 minutes, send it over on their phones or emails, which they can consume, like I said, while commuting to work or whatever. But when I want somebody to step out of their comfort zone, step out of what they're doing day in and day out, and upskill themselves to be in a better place professionally and personally, and to grow in their career and personal life, that's when the challenge comes in. Because not everybody has time to plug themselves out of their profession on a day-to-day basis and get enrolled in a coaching program which is or of a longer form. So you'd rather consume small parts. For example, take a 15-minute, half an hour, maximum 1 hour time management course. Learn not all of them, but maybe 2 or 3 basic skills. Start implementing them, get used to them, and then grow on from there on. So as time passes, I think all of this is gonna get into a bigger play now. And with the social media platforms like TikTok and all coming into play, the trainers, the coaches, the mentors have a tremendous amount of audience that they can reach out to. Now, if you just go on YouTube and search for coaching or training or tutorial, you will find millions and millions of videos, right? And they will be anywhere between 5 minutes to 20 minutes, whether it is something about Photoshop or learning how to film a good video or something more technical. And that's where the future is. So let's suppose if I want to build a program, how many people would have the time of the day to do their 9 to 5 job, come home, and then sit for another 4 hours into a classroom?
Right. No, it
Right?
does
So
take a
that's
lot of,
why,
it does take a toll on your
yeah.
entire routine. Yeah.
So that's why the trainers, I think trainers will have to, mentors and coaches will have to go into that direction now. And people who are already there, people who are already doing this, are way ahead of the curve. And still, we have a lot of people who think that, I call it the Kodak mentality, that they're still stuck in the past, that no, it's going to be the way it has always been. We want to be we want to be in a room all dressed up with bows and ties and suits, and stuck to a table and a chair, taking down notes. Nobody likes to write down pencil notes, even if you go by the argument of your brain retaining a lot more when you write on a paper.
Yeah,
Yes,
you
that
do.
research is fine, but then there's nothing wrong in that research. But then it's double work if you want to digitize it, right?
So
If there are
actually,
two sides
I
to
have a
this,
cop out. So I have a cop out for that. I use my iPad and there's a pencil on it, and
yeah.
that works. That works.
So effectively, there are solutions for that also. I use my note phone and I have a pen in that as well.
Oh yeah.
And
Sorry.
what I do is in my meetings, I just do that. When I'm in my meetings, I just pull out my phone, take down notes, minutes of the meeting, and everything. And before everybody's back on their desk, it's in their mailbox. It's as simple as that. So again, coming up to the point that some trainers, I think they still believe they still want to get into a room. And I think we are going in all areas. We're going beyond that classroom environment. Classroom environments are now considered to be a complete time wasters. And you would have heard of this phenomena called 1 minute manager or 1 minute meeting, you know, and stand up meetings. So, where the meetings are deliberately held without having the chairs in the room, because you tend to relax when you're sitting across a conference table. You go from discussing your project, then discussing the next best coffee and then lunch plans and things like that, and you end up wasting a lot of time. So a lot of organizations are implementing in some scenarios having short stand-up meetings. You get into a small room and there are no chairs there. You discuss what you have to and then you move out.
Got
Right?
it. That's
So
interesting.
those things are extremely important now, because again the way that we are consuming the world right now, our attention is so divided into so many things that the moment we get stuck to one place, we tend to get bored very easily,
Got it. Interesting.
right? Yeah.
That's actually a very curious point that you made. Is that our attention is also divided in a lot of ways.
Yeah.
Hmm.
And there's another. I'm sorry to cut you. There's another very important element that I see, being the main gameplay in the future, and that's gamifying the trainings. So now what we are working on now what the industries were working towards is the gamifying part of the training. So when I want to train on some aspect of upskilling somebody, rather than give them the dry arrangement of PowerPoint slides, I would rather turn it into an interactive role playing kind of situation, into a game per se, and then give choices like multiple choice questions based on a scenario, or give a concept and then have it applied on a real life situation. That engages the audience. So we are going into a completely new direction now.
Interesting. Farooq, I mean, if you have to look back about 15 years ago, getting into the kind of space that you were in was obviously, there was no easy way. But now, with so much information floating around over there, what are the kind of things that a person needs to be aware of? Or what are the kind of steps that a person could take to become, to have the skill set that you have right now, which is probably understanding how to become a time management co-host, or even just a motivational speaker. We've already covered what you could do to become a podcaster in one of our episodes, so we won't really delve so much into that. But I'm more curious about the training space as such, and what are the things that a person needs to be aware of, whether it's academic or it's skill set, or even the use of whatever tools available. So just walk us through a little bit about that right now.
Sure. So to answer the first part of the question, like I said, that you have to connect emotionally with your audience. But see, the critical part in becoming a mentor and becoming a coach for anything, I mean, it could be sports related or vocational training related or whatever, is the passion that you as a trainer should have in you. So this is, I mean, training. You might think of it. Training is like art. So you an artist cannot be a successful artist until the heart is in there. You look at celebrities in music industry or in film industry, acting industry. Any successful actor would tell you that they have their heart in their field. That's the reason they're successful. And the reason I say this, especially for a trainer, a coach, and a mentor, is because it's not about getting on the stage and being able to speak fluently and just go through a set of slides and expect that people will understand. There's a lot of things in relation to the emotional connection. There's tonality, there's enthusiasm, there's the way that you uplift people's emotions. So that is the soft skill side of the development of a person as a trainer and a coach. And the other thing is, you cannot fake it. There is no way that you can fake knowing about something without knowing in depth about that particular topic. And the moment you start faking it, it's going to show. And more so even now, when people are getting exposed because of the platform, social media platforms and all. So my advice to somebody looking into getting into this would be, first of all, don't rush it. Take your time. First, find your passion. Learn and grow into it yourself. Have different perspectives of different situations, different coaches in your area. Listen to them, attend their sessions, connect with them, learn from them. Do not take a shortcut and think that, oh, today I have learned something new and tomorrow I want to start teaching it. But rather than that, experience it yourself in your life. And then only and only if you have the passion of becoming a public speaker and being actually, at the end of the day, you're trying to help people. So that empathy and that feeling should be there in your heart. I cannot do it for the sake of doing it and not meaning to help people. So what happened with me, if I were to just give an example, was when I realized what time management is doing to my life, I got so overwhelmed and I said, this is like a magic potion that nobody's talking about. And for me, the passion of getting to know people and teaching these things to people came, one, naturally, because I come from a family of educators. Everybody from my mother to my aunt and everybody has been in education industry. So I think that got transferred in the blood. And while I was in college, I used to play in a band. So that also helped in being able to face a lot of people and be confident in that respect. But then I did not become a coach of time management immediately. I told you I have been training for around 13 odd years, but I have started training on my bespoke time management course, I think 2 years ago. And before that, I was focusing on developing myself and exploring different elements of what I wanted to coach. And with time, as I was growing, I realized because I was juggling a lot of things, I was juggling music, I was studying music, I was juggling my studies, I was juggling the work life. I had to start working very early on in my life, even before I had finished my studies. So I was juggling my studies and my professional life, and yet somehow I was able to juggle all of them very effectively. And a lot of people used to come up to me and say, how do you manage to do that? When we get home, we're exhausted, we're tired, we're not able to do anything. And you go from your office, you go to attend evening school, evening college. I was doing my master's. And then you have a full-time band. We used to play at least one gig a week. And to play a gig, you need to practice. So you're able to practice. I had a passion, I still do. I don't practice it that much. I have passion about collecting and building cars. So I used to build cars when I was younger, restore them and all. So you're able to do that as well. And that's when I realized that I'm doing something that people apparently don't realize that they can do as well. And then I experimented with that. Then I tried to pen down my techniques. How am I able to manage time? And eventually, with time, as I grew into my career, I got into more responsibilities in my office life. Still, I was able to manage those things. Then I got married. I have 3 kids. So manage the kids, married life, all of that. And when I realized that I'm still able to manage these things together and everybody seems to be happy around, then I realized I must be doing something right and I need to share it with people. And that's when I launched my official time management course. And during this time, I try to do as much research as possible into time management and productivity analysis and all of that. Read books, listened to, I don't know, dozens, maybe hundreds of podcasts, went to a lot of sessions myself. So my advice is, again, you need to want it from your heart. You need to be able to connect with it emotionally yourself, and then only will you be able to give this out to people. My best example could be Gary Vee. So I'm in love with Gary Vee, and the reason I'm in love with Gary Vee is because whatever he says comes straight from the heart, and it shows. His track record shows whatever he's talking about is something that he has practiced all his life. His belief is so strong in what he says is because he has lived that belief, he's lived that life. Likewise, if somebody comes and tells me, a lot of people approach me on social media and they say, I'm having trouble managing my work-life balance. So where can I start in terms of getting that time back for myself? And I get excited when somebody says that. And at times I get more engaged into solving their problem than they themselves are, because it excites me from inside. And that is what is required to be a coach. Because, being a coach and being a mentor is let me tell you, it's a very, very thankless job. It requires hard work, but you don't get as much appreciation. Think of it as a football coach who is always on the sidelines working like crazy with all the players. But then you have legends like Messi and Ronaldo and all of that who get the recognition. But there's a bigger person behind them who's working in the shadows for them. So being a mentor needs a lot of that commitment psychologically without being thirsty for recognition, right?
I think that's great advice for people out there who are looking to who have seen so much. There's a lot of resources out there, like, the Mind Valleys of the world, who say that, oh, you know what, all you have to do is attend a few of our sessions and you can get certified very quickly. But there's obviously a lot of hard work that goes into building something like that. And that is obviously evident from, the kind of output that you get from, obviously the hard work. And so there's no shortcuts to this thing. Thank you very much for joining us for this episode, Farrukh. I really appreciate it. I believe the best way that a person can get in touch with you is your website.
My website, my email, my social media, all the handles. I'm available on all platforms: Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. So my social media handle is Farrukh Talks. It's FARRUKH TALKS, Farrukh Talks. And my website is farrukhahmed.com, FARRUKHAHMED, farrukhahmed.com. And I'd love to help people in managing their time better, because my belief is the 24 hours that we are given by the Almighty are more than enough. There's a purpose of having those 24 hours in a day, and that is larger than what you can imagine right now.
Guys, I can vouch for this because I attended one of his time management sessions 4 days ago. Ever since, I have been far more disciplined in my approach to my work. Not saying that I haven't been productive. I'm just far more disciplined now, and so it's all thanks to this gentleman on the other side of this conversation. So thank you very much, Farrukh, for sharing your process, your progress with us, and I appreciate your story as well. So again, I'll be sharing all of his information in the show notes, so feel free to peruse that. I'll be dropping a few links as to the tools that we mentioned over here. Thank you very much again for listening into the East Podcast. You can reach out to me on the website, that's eastpodcast.in, or drop me an email at host@eastpodcast.in. Again, all of this will be in the show notes. Thank you very much for joining in for the episode, and we will see you in the next one.